class that we were over there. Her daughter was 1, and it's interesting that basically pathology. So she texted me and said, "Is there any?" She was "Is there any way that I get her in?" So I was going to go with Tim. He said there's some forms, and he said it might be a charge, but see if I can bring her by to sit in the bleacher room. Viewing room. Yeah, that's amazing. So I also teach in my class. We have a charge that we put like 5 or 6. Yeah.
So if you kids are interested in that, right, try to encourage them to.
It's one of my favorite shows growing up. I don't know how real it is in comparison to your profession. Quincy.
Yeah, Quincy was actually fairly real, except for like getting up on the soapbox part of the other and scream about 4 dollars. For so many people,
coming up on a turn or
but as far as the science and the medicine, I'll get that. There's a lot of truth to that. There really was.
With his sidekick Sam.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, you love it.
Scared us.
That would be a little bit.
It is 17-year-old samples, but 13 tested positive for fentanyl, but also 10 cocaine. Wow. These are folks that, according to the nurses down for they were known cocaine users, but they were not heavy opioids.
Wow.
And that's the concern. And North Mainland's right up there with them.
Nice story of that.
Oh, yes, yes.
So I said that was the same one from Marshall?
Yes. It's logistics people. Some don't have that. Usually, so some firemen, police officers, people who respond to containers or hospital and things like that. Gotcha. And also, some questions we have. One of the questions they send me is,
I've been more sick. Here's the problem.
We actually took advantage of the program?
Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
That's powerful.
To try to speak
Well, thank you very much. Right?
I hope so. I think so. I'm pretty sure.
It's Peter Gillespie. Andrew's my middle name.
Oh, well, I'm so sorry.
That's fine. No, I'm bother. See the people.
I was looking next to the tag, that's why. I'm so sorry.
I guess it is, yeah.
I'd love to come down.
Okay, I'll send you. I'm pretty sure I do with all the chains, but how about let's get it just easy?
I don't know how to find it. I can't sometimes. Press P-R-E-S.
Yes.
Rich, R-C-H. Number 46.
Just, I'll send it out tomorrow.
Well, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Mandarin Branch Library. My name is Lisa Buggs. I am the coordinator for lifelong learning for the Jacksonville Public Library System. I'm going to get some housekeeping out of the way. If you need to go to the restroom, it's out the door to the left, and an immediate left. If there is an emergency, look for me, the tall lady, and I will get us out here in a safe manner, even though we do have JFRC and JSO in the house. I just want you guys to know that we usually have a plan. So look for us and follow the directions of the people in the uniforms. Also, I just want to really thank you guys for coming out tonight. We know it's a weeknight. We know that everyone has had probably a long day at work, but we really appreciate you coming out to this really important discussion that we're having. I'd like to introduce to you our panelists. On the very end, we have Dr. Peter Gillespie. He is an associate medical examiner for the medical examiner's office. We have Lieutenant Mark Rowley. He serves as the Data and Privacy Officer for Jacksonville Fire and Rescue Department and sits on the City of Jacksonville's Opioid Pilot Project Committee. Then next to him is Richard Preston. He is a recovering addict of 12 years. He's the author of 2 books on addiction, including Serenity Granted, and he is the owner of 2 sober living residences. Next to him is Ron, is it Lendvay? Lendvay. He's the Director of Investigation and Homeland Security for the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office. And rounding us out tonight is Tim Quick. He is the Chief Investigator for the State Attorney's Office. Please, a round of applause for our panel of experts. So we're going to begin today's discussion with a general sort of layout. What types of drugs does the term opiate cover? And tell us where these addicts are getting these drugs, for those people who are on the panel who can answer that question.
I can answer the question about what kind of drugs they are. They vary from everything from pharmaceutical opioids, things like hydrocodone, oxycodone, and pharmaceutical morphine, codeine, hydromorphone, things like that, to illicit drugs such as heroin. And now the big problem here in Jacksonville is a drug called fentanyl. It's a synthetic opiate. It's been around for several years, but recently clandestine chemists have been making variants of them called analogs, which are much more powerful than fentanyl, which itself is probably estimated to be about 100 times more powerful than morphine. And they've been adding those to illicit drug preparations of all kinds, not just opiates. We're starting to see it in cocaine cases too. And those are the drugs involved. Exactly where they're getting them, investigators might know better. Obviously things like heroin and fentanyl analogs are illicit drugs. Other things are diverted into the black market from pharmaceutical sources, patients, and things like that. You gentlemen might know better than I do about that.
I'll take where they're coming from. You can buy drugs in any part of town, anywhere from within a stone's throw of this library to the traditional, more drug-infested areas of town. And one of the things that's probably changed is the diversification of the product that they carry. You used to have a cocaine house or a marijuana house, things like that. But as I go with our guys, the narcotics guys, when they do search warrants now, it's not at all uncommon to go to a traditional area that sold cocaine and find also in there the diverted prescription pills that the doctor was talking about, to find heroin, just a smorgasbord. So if there is a profit to be made, a drug dealer is going to sell whatever he can get his hands on that he's going to be able to make money off of.
Okay. So there are the two sides of it. There are the people who are purchasing the drugs and getting the high, and then there are the people who are profiting by selling.
Right. And sometimes they're one and the same.
Okay. So I know that one of the things that we have here is something called Project Save Lives. And Mark, can you give us an overview of Project Save Lives?
Yeah, so Project Save Lives is the City of Jacksonville's opioid pilot program funded through your tax dollars. $1.46 million was set aside, and the program began November 16th of last year. And essentially, it meets the person who is suffering or experiencing an overdose at the ED. And traditionally, when somebody is experiencing an overdose, and hopefully 911 is called, or they are driven by somebody to the ED, they are reversed and or resuscitated with a drug called naloxone or Narcan. And with that reversal, oftentimes they awake very rapidly, and they will experience withdrawal symptoms, very painful. Some will reference it called dope sick, and they'll want to leave. They do not want to be in the ED. And the term that we use in our profession is treating and street. And that is not to be derogatory or disparaging. It is simply that patients have rights. And they have rights to make bad decisions. So what we're doing with Project Save Lives is as soon as that person hits the ED on our stretcher or through being driven up, we have peer recovery specialists, people with lived experience in addiction and recovery, to speak that language of the heart, to let them know, I know where you're at, I know what you're going through, and we're going to get you some help. And I'm going to walk you through and navigate this with you. And they also act as advocates with the nurse and the physician to get them treatment for withdrawal symptoms. And when I say treatment for withdrawal symptoms, I'm talking as simple as baclofen and clonidine, by mouth, assuming they're conscious and awake. And within minutes, some of their symptoms resolve. And they make them aware of a program. The goal is to get them to go immediately from the ED into residential treatment up to 9 to 13 days through our program. If they decide, I don't want to do residential, because many can't, they have barriers. If it's childcare, if it's work, if it's other situations, then we say, let's do outpatient therapy, or outpatient treatment, I should say. And we also offer the medication-assisted treatment, which includes induction of buprenorphine at the ED, immediate stopping of withdrawal symptoms. And if they elect to do the medication-assisted treatment, then they also have to agree immediately within 24 hours to go to the detox and treatment to have that followed. We also offer them detox based on their withdrawal symptoms. Something that this project is doing that no other project in the United States is doing is we're combining everything. We're putting somebody there who can speak that language of compassion, address compassion fatigue, and those sideways thoughts or comments from myself and nurses and staff at the ED, and we are giving them wraparound services. We're also testing them in the ED, their urine, for fentanyl. There is nowhere in the nation where we're currently doing basically point-of-care urine dipsticks for different fentanyl analogs. And as we learn about the different analogs, the ME's office, Premier Biotech, will basically put that into their testing. Because of that, we have been able to track and show the different analogs that are here in Jacksonville. We've seen an alarming increase in persons that are recreational users of cocaine, that swear they're not touching opioids, but they're testing positive for fentanyl, and they're being reversed with Narcan. So it's very dangerous. It's very scary right now that we're seeing possibly a change in the demographic. But Project Save Lives is immediate intervention, wraparound 360 services, and we have 69 persons right now that are actually getting treatment through Project Save Lives. And some of that treatment, again, is inpatient, outpatient. They're followed, recovery care specialists, knocking on the door, calling them, driving them home 3 days a week. And it may also include other things such as 12-step programs, church, risk reduction, not using the fentanyl, but using something else. So it's very catered services to the individual client.
Okay. So we have you as a responder, we have JSO as a responder, we have the medical examiner's office that has to deal with, one of the consequences of overdosing. We have the state attorney's office that deals with it from a different level. But let's talk to Richard. Richard, you're recovering, you have been for 12 years. Kudos to you, 12 years. And tell us, what is it like being the individual who is addicted to an opiate?
Fortunately, during my addiction, I wasn't addicted to opiates. It wasn't big back in those days. I'm sure it was, or it was just on the cusp. I was a cocaine user, crack, and alcohol. The one thing I can say, back when I was in my full addiction, They used to tell us that crack was the most addictive substance known to man, or cocaine was, but we all know that's not true anymore. But to be held slave to a substance, in my first book I talk about it, it is almost, it's hard to convey. Because, you know, I have parents and loving parents, and my mom would be like a lot of parents in here, just stop, or, you know, take 30 days off, or this or that. Only do it on the weekends. But to the person that has the disease of addiction, it starts out as fun, it catches up with you, then it overwhelms you. And then you wake up one day and you just gotta have it, and you will go exhaust any means to get it, and that's when you start coming in contact with these jokes right here. Exactly.
Absolutely. So, what happens, Ron, when you get a call? When there's a 911 call that comes in, how does JSO respond? JSO and JFRD, how do you guys respond when a call comes in?
Well, many times we respond at the same time. It'll come in as a medical distress call. Your basic caller often can't diagnose exactly what's going on, so it'll come in as a medical emergency. Sometimes it'll be a suspected overdose. So we're often dispatched for these calls at the same point in time. If for some reason it's a call that came out that didn't involve JFRD, the police officer would go, if there's a medical need right at that point in time, that's going to be the first priority. So if we see someone who's in need of medical attention, the first call that's going to be made is to JFRD to come out and assist, and if CPR is needed or anything else, that's going to get started. If there's a criminal incident involved, then they're going to deal with the criminal incident, make sure everything's stable and safe. Then they'll assess the person's medical needs from that point.
Okay. All right. So what's the first thing JFRD does once you get on the scene?
And just to second on what Lendvay says, the primary service entry or the primary 911 center is Jacksonville Sheriff's Office, and they simultaneously relay the call. Oftentimes, our officer stays on the phone with our dispatcher and call taker to ascertain what's going on, to maybe get location, things like that. So we work very well together as far as our communication centers. And once we arrive on scene, aside from scene safety and making sure that we're not interfering with a potential crime scene, which, by the way, law enforcement has control of the scene, legally, so we really operate with them well. And our outside of our own personnel safety is airway, is safety of the patient and getting them breathing. The primary symptom is decreased responsiveness and knocks out the breathing. That's the concern we have for opioids. And I'm pleased, and correct me if I'm wrong, Director, but every JSO recruit, out before they hit the street, they're trained in CPR, and they can manage airway. From JSO to JFRD, we can all manage that airway, and they also have AEDs in their vehicles. So we've had several lives saved by JSO prior to us getting there. So we work well together in that sense. But our primary response is, of course, address their airway. As soon as we even believe it's an opioid on board, either through our own assessment of the patient and or what we see on the scene, or as evidenced by bystanders telling us what's going on, the obvious needle in the arm, the young man in the bathroom, at a local gas station, these are telltale signs. And we go ahead and administer Narcan or naloxone, IV or IM, and usually within 1-2 minutes they're responding and awake, and we still provide them supportive care and transport them to the ED.
Okay. So, Dr. Gillespie, what effect does opiate use have on a human body, just in general, as a whole? What does it do?
Well, in general, they do what they've been designed to do. The pharmaceutical ones is they relieve people's pain and their pain symptoms, but at the same time, they're powerful respiratory depressants. So they're going to reduce your respiratory rate, which, if it gets low enough, is going to impact your brain, your heart, and your other oxygen-sensitive organs like your kidneys and liver a lot. But the respiratory part, it really just shuts down your breathing.
So we know that from a physical standpoint, it's keeping us from breathing. Let's talk about another aspect of this that we don't usually think about, because when you watch it on the news, it's mostly making sure that people get some sort of physical help immediately, but there is a legal aspect to opioid addiction. And Tim, if you could sort of talk to us about the legal implications of people who are dealing in opiates.
Unfortunately for the state of Florida, the law changed in October. Prior to that, fentanyl was not a substance that we could charge somebody with contributing to a death. If somebody died as a result of a fentanyl overdose, you could not charge that dealer with causing that death. But fortunately for us, federal law allowed that. So prior to October 1st, we worked with JSO, we worked 2 cases with Clay County and one with Jax Beach, where the cause of death is fentanyl. So we took those cases to the federal court in Jacksonville. We currently have pending 5 cases with 7 defendants, and whose victims died as a result of fentanyl. After October 1st, the law changed. Now we can charge somebody, say Florida, for the state statute, with causing a death to fentanyl.
Now, are the folks who are being charged, have they also been selling other drugs? Like, are they also people who are selling cocaine or selling marijuana, or is it strictly?
So, like what I mentioned earlier, the house, I think the one we did recently was a plethora of narcotics in the house. I hit one with our guys prior to that. JSO did the knock and talk and kick the door in for us. We did the inventory. The powder cocaine, there was heroin in there, there was some crack in there, firearms, a large amount of cash. I think you all have that in the house as well. So, selling over everything. And I think a lot of times we've seen this, that the dealers think they're selling heroin, not knowing it's laced with fentanyl. One of the recent cases, I believe was your case, Ron, that the dealer is adamant that he's only selling heroin. He swears that he didn't have fentanyl. But FDA came back and tested it, and it was pure fentanyl. So a lot of times these dealers don't know what they're doing. They're selling poison, or they're selling loaded guns is what they're doing to people, and the results are deadly.
It's a good segue into how that happens. So the reality is these synthetic fentanyls are being made in clandestine laboratories, typically in other countries, China, Mexico, and it's coming through traditional drug routes here. But the reality is it's much cheaper than the heroin is. So every time that shipment changes hands from the original trafficker to the next level dealer, everybody's mixing in a little fentanyl because it's increasing their profit margin. So if that, by the time it gets down to the dealer like Mr. Quick's speaking about, you may have had 3 or 4 different levels of dealers that have mixed in fentanyl to increase the amount of heroin that they had that they could cut and sell. So that potency with the fentanyl is getting higher and higher because it's profit driven.
If I could add to the danger to law enforcement, a lot of guys, our guys who are out there buying this stuff, is that it just takes a small amount of fentanyl to absorb through your fingertips or that you get healed, and it's deadly to the law enforcement as well. And we don't always know what we're coming in contact with. It's dangerous all the way around.
Yeah, we had a policy change recently in regards to that. We did some research with some labs, and we actually have in our property and evidence room, we don't field test powdered substances at all in the field now. It's just too dangerous either to open them in a vehicle where it can get in the circulation system, or if you're out and testing something on the hood of a car and a breeze comes by, getting that into your respiratory system can be instantly, dramatic for you. So our powdered substances, if they're going to be tested, if there's arrest involved in a field testing environment, you go to our property and evidence room, we actually have a glass room built that does not have air from the top. It has a vent hood in there. So everything's done under glass, wearing full protective measures, to make sure that they don't get an exposure. But we've seen it around the country where officers have been exposed, doing typical drug work, drug warrants, that type of thing, where they've been exposed to fentanyl. It becomes airborne. The suspect tries to knock over a table where his drugs are, or through an entry into a room, something is turned over that becomes airborne. And there's been a number of cases where numbers of officers have been sick and had to be hospitalized.
Dr. Gillespie, how has the epidemic in Jacksonville affected your work in the medical examiner's office?
Well, it's increased our workload quite a bit. I was just looking at the numbers here, just for the first 6 months of last year. We don't have this year's numbers, but in those first 6 months, we had almost 150 cases of deaths involving fentanyl, just fentanyl, and that's a tremendous amount. if you look at the whole year's cases, we're doing almost 3,000 autopsies a year, and that's about 5% voluntarily. That's a tremendous amount with just fentanyl. So there are days where we've had nothing but drug intoxications. It's gone down a little bit. It seemed to have spiked around early to mid 2017, and it's come down a little. But now, as the gentleman said, we're starting to see mixed cocaine, fentanyl cases, things like this. So it's really just put a tremendous amount of pressure on our available resources. I mean, it's hard to get them all done sometimes.
In 2016, Jacksonville ranked number 2. This is the IME's, the state IME data, but number 2 in fentanyl deaths, just under West Palm Beach, Miami.
Wow. Second to Miami only. Think about that. Think about that. We are second to Miami. So the public has expressed an interest in, is it, how do you pronounce this?
Naloxone?
Naloxone. And there are some libraries in other parts of the country that keep the drug in stock because we've had people who have overdosed in libraries. Do you recommend that folks try to get a hold of this, especially if they have a loved one who they know is probably experiencing addiction with opioids?
So, absolutely. So anybody, especially people, loved ones, friends, family, the person themselves that are suffering from addiction, to carry it. Equate it with an EpiPen. If anybody has an allergy and has an EpiPen, it's very important that other people know where your EpiPen is in the workplace. It's not good when you're at work and it's in the glove box of your vehicle in your parking garage. So in that same fashion, if you have everybody now has access to nasal naloxone or Narcan. So the governor signed a bill, actually almost 2 years ago. They also changed the Good Samaritan Act law to incorporate identification and protection for every single person in this room, all right, to administer Narcan for a suspected overdose. So you don't need to be a doctor, you don't need to be a paramedic. You just, if they're not responsive and you suspect it, Narcan is that safe. You put them on their side, you give a shot up the nose, call 911. If they don't respond, give them the other dose. And it is free. So last week I purchased it at the Walgreens. I carry it in my private vehicle as well as my city vehicle. Again, Walgreens it takes about 5 minutes to fill out a form. It's free. So they didn't ask for my health insurance. So it's a wonderful thing. I would recommend essentially anybody, because in my profession we're about saving lives, and we're very limited in our scope as far as the whole big picture of addiction. However, there is concern about false sense of security. Naloxone or Narcan is a reversal agent. It takes that opioid off the receptor site, pushes it off because it has a tighter affinity, or it binds better, if you will, than most opioids. But as everybody here will tell you, that next analog that's hooked up may be stronger, and it may bind tighter, meaning the Narcan may not work as well. So the concern is, I want everybody to know, is that Narcan is a temporary reversal agent. Its half-life and its therapeutic value in your body is 30 to 81 minutes. That's what the National Institute of Health says. Well, let's hope your liver's working well, your kidneys. Everybody's body is different. So maybe I've only got 30 minutes. The next person has an hour. Don't gamble. You still need to call 911. And so if they administer Narcan, they need to call 911. Even if the victim wakes up and says, I don't want it, don't call them. They leave. Don't let them in the house. If it's your loved one, let us in. Let us talk to them. We want to get them help. And it will wear off. And we're finding, because of these analogs are so strong, we're looking at Narcan drips. Even some ERs have nasal atomized Narcan, put them on low dosage because the drug's so strong. So while I am a strong advocate for it being carried, you must call 911 because it will wear off. And I don't know if Director Lendvay, I've heard of these word Lazarus parties, or where Narcan parties where one person is carrying the Narcan and they switch off. And I don't know if you have to speak to that.
The email came out recently. I think it was UNF, chief out there, sent the email around, but they have Narcan parties. Narcan's naloxone, but Narcan parties, where one person is responsible for the kit, and everybody else is doing the heroin or whatever they're doing. That person responsible for administering the Narcan, and somebody passes out. Scary.
Yeah, I think Lieutenant Rowley did a great job of explaining it. So absolutely a great idea. But is there a segment of the community where it creates a false sense of security, that it's there as a safety net for you? Probably so. It doesn't override the benefits of it, but that's certainly, unfortunately, probably a byproduct of it as well. Because you guys have patients you've had to administer multiple times in a day.
We are. We're now carrying 2 different doses because of that. We're carrying the small 0.4 and the 2 milligram syringe because of the strength. And a lot of our paramedics are choosing to go right to the 2 milligrams. And, you know, time will tell. But I have a concern with places like UNF for young people that are going to feel a false sense, and that safety net may encourage use. Also, because of the rapid removal of that opioid off that brain receptor site, the withdrawal symptoms are quite dramatic. And usually people medicate. So we're going to see more polypharmacy. You know, we're going to see more benzos and more alcohol. That sedative to take that edge off that withdrawal symptom, or to go back into that opioid to knock off the withdrawal symptom. Because people waking up from Narcan is not fun. You know, oftentimes they're agitated, confused, aggressive. They're not happy. So there's a concern.
And if I could, Lisa,
yes,
I've also partnered with Drug Free Duval, and I co-chair the Northeast Florida Opioid and Heroin Task Force, Education Committee. And in our ever-ending quest to bring awareness and education to this epidemic, folks, we actually go out to workplaces, we go to agencies, and we hold training classes. And if anybody here is interested in that, we can also get you signed up for that. To date, and we just started this in October of last year, we have reached over 3,000 people to give training on signs of opioid abuse, signs and symptoms, safe storage and disposal of opioids, which is a big one too. Because what we find is, and a lot of people, you guys have probably read this in newspapers and seen it on the news, a lot of these young kids are getting started with the opioids simply by going into a medicine cabinet and getting prescription pills that haven't been used. And we also do training in the use of naloxone and Narcan, and some of the things that Lieutenant talked about, we cover that as well. So it's been good for us.
In Project Save Lives, persons who leave the ED, because technically they're discharged from the ED and then they're asked to go into treatment. Whatever their decision is, they are given Narcan, nasal Narcan, saying that you can now get it at Walgreens for free. We also would give it to their family and friends. So if somebody goes to the ED, no questions asked, they're your friend, we're discharging them, and they say, heck no, I just want to get out of here. Would you at least let us give you this free Narcan? So to show you that we are proponent, we're definitely pushing it.
And I read the Project Save Lives, the last update to it, and there are 12% of these overdoses occur in zip code 32210 on the west side. So is there any special attention being paid to lowering the impact of the crisis in that area?
Sure, we have tactical narcotics squads assigned to different areas of town, and we do have one assigned to the area that you're talking about. It's the area on the west side that is kind of between 103rd Street and Normandy Boulevard. That's where most of 32210 is. And so, they do targeted enforcement in that geographic area, but that's not enough. So you have supplies coming in from different areas, so we layer that with mid-level and big deal, which is what we call our trafficking level that brings stuff into the city. We have squads that each do that work as well to try to get the supplies as they come into those local dealers in that area. So you have to layer the enforcement approach to really have an effect.
But, again, looking at the report, we see that this is occurring all over Duval County. So it's not that it's happening only on the west side. It's not happening only on the northwest side. It is happening all over Duval County. As we're talking about with UNF. Who would have thought that students at UNF were having these Narcan parties? So when we look at 32210 and we look at the west side and we think of it as being an area that is mostly white, according to the statistics, last year 84% of the overdoses in Jacksonville occurred among white residents. Normally when we think about drugs and drug overdoses and drug users, people automatically think about black folk. Many argue that the race distinction is part of the reason why this epidemic is now called a crisis. Whereas in the 80s, when there was this crack epidemic, it was those people and they are criminals. Whereas now we're seeing people who are predominantly white taking opioids, and now it's a crisis. So from a legal standpoint, how are the folks being treated differently now who have opiate addiction as opposed to those who are on crack and heroin in the 80s?
Well, it's a crisis now because it's killing people. That's what it is nationwide. It's not just here in Duval County. And demographics are pretty much the same throughout the United States. Ohio, West Virginia, pretty much mirror what we're seeing here. But again, it's a crisis because people are dying. Over 42,000 people in 2016. 464, I believe it was in 2016 in Duval County. So the focus is on the opioids and opiates because people are dying. And we're targeting those, as Rick Lendvay mentioned, targeting the distribution, bringing the drugs into our city. And then we're also targeting those dealers responsible for the overdose deaths. And it's tough. You got to work the case backwards from a victim who overdoses and dies, and then you got to trace it back through cell phones, through witnesses, through family members. And it can be done, and we've done that. We've proved that so far working with JSO. But it's tough, and it is a crisis. And it's different from the crack, the powder cocaine, methamphetamine, everything. I started in law enforcement in 83, so I've seen it all. I've never seen anything like this. Nothing comes close to this. And this is a crisis.
I cannot speak to any racial disparity, but what our data shows is that addiction is not discriminatory. It crosses class. And as you speak to a possibility of a stigma with the 80s cocaine, there is a stigma with opioid addiction. And anybody who's ever experienced addiction or has a friend or family with addiction knows what I'm talking about. And we're still seeing that stigma here, within our program, our treatment, I'm going to even say within our own personnel. And I'm also a ER nurse, and there's stigma there. So there's a lot that I have to check myself, and I'm not immune to that. Nope, I don't think anyone is immune to that stigma. I know there's stigma in the 80s, and I still think it's moved forward here just with a different substance.
Mark mentioned the stigma. I met with Citrus County a while back, and they had a serious problem when I first mentioned here in Duval County. But the thing he pointed out was you have to overcome that stigma because that's associated with opioid addiction. You got to overcome that, and that's through education, through treatment, through panels like this in the community. I know people who've been affected by it. A good friend of mine in Compton, South Florida, his son overdosed and died. Got to overcome that stigma. It could happen to anybody. My second month here in my position in the state attorney's office, we were reviewing a case, and the victim was 24, but he's somebody I coached in basketball years ago, lost track of it. So it can happen to anybody, any family, my family, your family. I'm telling you, the stigma, get rid of the stigma about opioids and opiates. It's out there, and it will affect everybody, and that has affected a lot of people already.
And speaking of a lot of people, an alarming 54% of last year's overdoses in Jacksonville occurred among individuals who were between the ages of 25 and 39 years old. What can we do as just Joe Q citizen to help solve, I guess we can't solve the crisis, but how can we help alleviate it a little bit among our young adults? I mean, this is huge. 54% between the ages of 25 and 39, when people are like usually in the prime of life, they overdosed in Jacksonville. What can we do?
One of the number one things, and I harp on, is awareness and education. It is at the forefront of what we need to do. We have to understand that addiction is not a moral failure. Moms seem to think if their child is addicted, that they failed. You know, I raised 5 kids, one of them's on, I failed. So we've got to overcome that stigma, and we've got to overcome the stigma of the addict. The addict sits next to you in a cubicle. The addict is in your church. The addict is everywhere you go. A lot of times when I'll have a group therapy, I go to AA or NA, that room is comprised of all ages, colors, race, sizes, you got it. And these are places, and I always tell the guys, we probably would have never crossed paths if it wasn't for our addiction. And the running joke is, you know, crack, bringing people together. Alcohol, bringing people together. So awareness and education and breaking down that stigma. It is amazing. Today, folks, I may go talk to somebody and tell them what I've been through, and you know, it's one of the common things to say, and I guess it's the right thing to say, is you don't look like an addict. Well, I'm an addict, trust me. And what does an addict look like? Everybody in this room. So when people like Prince or this or that, when we find out that those people are addicts, nothing surprises me. Nothing. It could be one of these guys in blue, one of these guys in white, doctors, lawyers. It does not surprise me because I've sat in rooms with them for years hearing their story.
I think Mr. Preston makes a great point. Excuse me. Prevention and education is the most important piece here because, you know, an ounce of prevention is worth a ton of cure. Trust me, once you get to the point where somebody needs help. But that safety net is needed. So as I travel to a number of forums, and many of us go to a lot of the same forums, the one thing you'll hear from folks is the lack of availability for treatment and aftercare for those that do have an addiction or they have a family member with an addiction. So that's why I'm so encouraged by the Project Save Lives that Lieutenant Rowley's been talking about. We have a pilot program here in this town that's trying to make a difference there. A pilot is that, you know, and if it's successful, we'll learn how to capitalize on those successes and expand it. There's already discussion about that. But without appropriate treatment avenues for people that the prevention didn't work for, then we're going to have a problem. Law enforcement is, you know, I'm not trying to take a back seat on this. We have a role as well. But prevention and education and that treatment piece are the most important pieces of this puzzle. And then we have to do our part in strategically working to keep this stuff to a minimum. But if there's a demand, there's going to be a supply. That's just basic economics. But prevention and education, and then treatment options for folks that do have a problem. And that seems to be the biggest failure right now, whether it's mental health or substance abuse treatment. There's not many options for people in the community.
Something I encourage us all to remember that this evolved over time, and there is, in my personal opinion, there's not one finger to point at one individual or one agency or entity. This is not blame the doctors for writing scripts or blame law enforcement or blame legislature but if you look at, everybody has a role. So if we look at, say, cracking down on the pill mills, you know, there was an impact. If you look at Joint Commission, hospital standards, pushing pain relief. And when I say pushing pain relief, I mean literally document the pain scale and tie it back to reimbursement. Patient satisfaction surveys were tied back to reimbursement. So we have a lot of physicians and providers, and you know, front row can speak to it, that were basically forced to medicate patients versus helping them manage. And a lot of that is changing. It's all changing. The American Medical Society has dropped the pain scales. Joint Commission, which basically credits hospitals, dropped the pain scale requirements. They dropped it out of the survey. So we're moving in a very positive direction to I would say, empower providers and physicians to better manage, to explain to the patients that pain is going to be appropriate. You know, you're going to have it. You know, that a 0 to pain scale is probably not achievable, and there's risks with it. Drug Free Evolved does a great job working with youth. I took an opportunity mentoring a young man this weekend who's trying pot, and 14-year-old. And we had a little game. We were going somewhere. I said, well, before we do this, I need you to spend 10 minutes with me. We're going to talk about marijuana. And I told him about, marijuana being laced with fentanyl. or spray, fake weed, spice. I scared her, intentionally. I told them the truth, and just told them the dangers involved with that. And this goes back to the awareness, the education.
Richard, what's it like, what's the road to sobriety like? What is it like for a person who has to fight this and move towards sobriety?
Obviously, we know the rate of recidivism in addiction is horrible. When I was at my last stop, they told me only 5% of you guys would make it, and typically it's about 3%. And I told them, you know, come hell or high water, I'm going to be in that 5%. But Lieutenant said something earlier. Just like all of us are individuals, everybody's road to recovery is a little different. Of course, there's a traditional 12-step program, spiritual programs, but what I've come to find, Lisa, is this is an entirely new animal. We have great doctors from the VA. We have Dr. Soren over there, where we have to maintain some of these people to keep from killing themselves, or they'll never get off this, with substitution, Suboxone, and different things of that nature. When I was coming up in my addiction, some of the people in the treatment facility were getting methadone, and we sort of looked down on it, you know, said negative things. But my thinking has changed on that, and I understand the importance of it because this is death we're talking about. It's amazing. I was listening to someone on TV the other day, and they were weighing marijuana and opioids, and this guy was one of the most staunch conservatives who said he would never relent on marijuana and stuff. He says, you know, I'm down with it because there has never been in the history of the world, according to him, a death associated with marijuana use, which blew my mind. But I brought this picture to show people this is what addiction will get you to, and this is me 12 years ago. Kudos to him for talking to that young man before you get to the point of being addicted, Lisa, because once you get addicted, that talk is no good. So kudos to you. Good job.
And then you're just really reinforcing what Tim said, because no one's ever seen anything like this before. So this is unlike any other drug addiction that we've seen before. And kudos to all of you for the role that you play in helping to educate the public, for helping the public, helping those people who are not only the addicts, but the people who are around them. We have a few minutes and we'll take some questions from the audience if you have any.
May I add something first?
Sure, of course.
Take questions. Because we talked about the age demographic, which is an important thing.
Yes.
And at least in the fatalities that we have seen.
Yes.
There's a fairly small number amongst the really young users. And then in the group that you referred to, about 25 to 35, is a pretty big chunk of our cases, but then there's a very substantial amount that is actually older than that. The first 6 months of 2017, people 35 to 50, there were 54 fatalities, compared to 42 for the younger group, and over 50, there were 32 fatalities. I don't really know what to make about that, except you know, maybe heroin addicts are living longer, or people are switching from pharmaceuticals to heroin. I don't know. It's just a very substantial proportion of the deaths is really in an older patient population that we see.
I actually have a theory on this, which is difficult to test, but those users that have been using for many years kind of had their dosing down to a science, for lack of a better term, and they knew what they could handle. But this fentanyl, the increase of fentanyl we've seen, is what was hard for them to anticipate what that was going to do to that normal dose that they took. And that dose that was a normal dose that they may have normally took was now a fatal dose because it had such a higher percentage of fentanyl as opposed to the heroin.
And we have a doctor. And yes,
I don't want to insert myself on the panel, but you invited me, so thank you.
Yes, thank you.
I'm Dr. Mike Sorna. I am a
quadruple boarded addiction psychiatry and addiction medicine physician. I am chief of medication assisted treatments for substance use disorders for North Florida, South Georgia Department of Veterans Affairs. I found out much because I heard you on NPR. So a good penetrance. Just a comment, I appreciate everybody that came here, but I am struck since I hear this on NPR almost every day driving into work, which is great for my job security and for everybody who's up here's job security, not so great for our population, but we have like 15 or 20 people that showed up here, so thank you for being engaged with this problem. I'd like to say, first of all, to answer your question about what makes this different than the 80s, the medical director for the Centers for Disease Control came out last month and made a statement, and it's a pretty big one. The statement was, we are poised to lose an entire generation of Americans to this epidemic. This is not the 80s. This is since 2012, the accidental overdose deaths, all causes, have exceeded automobile accidents. Automobiles were number one up until, since the invention of the Model T, until 2012. Now it's this. That's different. That's very different. And we are poised, not my quote, the big epidemiological expert, to lose an entire generation of Americans. This is serious business. Prevention, I love prevention. It's definitely an important part of this problem, and that is the future. Okay, so in medicine, we talk about primary, secondary, and tertiary prevention strategies. So primary prevention is to prevent people from developing this disorder in the first place. And that's an important part of the problem, but it's not going to save that generation of Americans that have the disease. Those interventions are secondary and tertiary interventions, and going out and educating folks is not going to change those outcomes, guaranteed. We know that to be true. The war on drugs, just say no, dismal failure, all right? Okay, so, but thoughtful, how we prescribe opioids, how do we train people about the risk, that is important for the next generation of future at-risk people, in particular people who can carry that genetic liability, genetic liability of this illness. And so, secondary and tertiary prevention is where I come in medication-assisted treatments. And so this disease is different. So thank you for bringing that up compared to the other addictive disorders that we deal with. And I'm also going to soften the language. We don't use the word addiction as much, although I happen to be an alcoholic outside being called an addict. However, a lot of our patients recoil at that, and so we call it substance use disorders. This is a disease process, and if you look at actually the epidemiology in our nation, the way the disease spread, it spread through Ohio River Basin, Ohio Valley Basin kind of area, and then it spread through the southeast and then spread west. And so it spreads just like, bird flu, if it was going to come through and wipe out our population. It spreads like a disease because it is a disease. Okay? So it behaves like other diseases that we monitor, the CDC monitors. So I like the idea of substance use disorder patients. These are patients that are struggling with a medical illness that responds. Now, what's different in this epidemic compared to the other substance use epidemics, which I don't want to lose sight of because those are important too. Alcohol and tobacco still are going to kill a lot more people than this even does. But this is different because in those disease processes, we tend to say, hey, abstinence-based therapy, go work a program of recovery, get treatment, 12 steps. I love 12 steps, saved my life, okay? But 12 steps doesn't work well for this. So DOD and VA, we are ones that came up with clinical practice guidelines regarding the treatment of these disorders, looking at the epidemiologic data in partnership with the CDC, in partnership with our very large organizations, including, so the VA and DOD are big healthcare providers in the United States. And what we've discovered is there's really two state-of-the-art gold standard treatments for opioid use disorder. Those two treatments are methadone and buprenorphine. Okay? I will not recommend abstinence. If you want to do abstinence, there's a good reason for it. I'll work with you because it's patient choice, right? However, the standard of care is substitution therapy. Okay? There's a close third that's going to move up to equivalency with buprenorphine as evidence emerges, and that's Vivitrol. Vivitrol is an opiate blocking drug, so it's not a substitution therapy. Outcomes are excellent with that also. The problem is it's very expensive and it's hard to get people on it. So you're going to see, but it's still a medication-assisted treatment. So every single person that comes into the Department of Veterans Affairs who suffers with this disorder is going to be offered at one of those standard of care treatments. And if they go, I really want to just kind of stop on my own, I go, okay, but here's the risk. And the risk is overdose death. The other thing I want to bring your attention to is the DEA just testified to Congress in February regarding the fentanyl emergence. This epidemic is interesting in many ways. First of all, we're going to see a shifting of demographic because of the cocaine. You're going to see more African Americans dying from this illness pretty soon and pretty fast, which is alarming because that population previously seemed to be relatively protected. That protection is no longer there. That is true for other demographics that are currently being represented. This disease will spread to other demographics, I guarantee it. Okay. The other issue is going to be is what people think they're doing. Right now, I don't know what the numbers are, maybe our colleagues can answer this, but I know what the DEA testified to Congress about in February is that there's a huge emergence of counterfeit oxycodone, hydrocodone, Xanax. Okay? I got people who have overdosed thinking they were getting Xanax. They look just like 2 milligrams antibars, and they're fentanyl. Okay? Because what's happening is as the medical profession has gotten better about not prescribing these medications, it's not palatable to the drug user to go to powder heroin, okay? Because I don't do heroin. They draw an intellectual boundary. I do oxycodone, except it's no longer oxycodone. They got pill presses, they can make the pills. It's hard for a pharmacist, they can't tell the difference. The only way they can tell the difference is send it to a lab and find out it's better. So here's what I tell everybody. I don't borrow medicine from anyone. I don't care who I think you are, okay, or what your status in the community. I don't go borrow Tylenol from you, okay? Because a lot of the prescription pills out there are probably fentanyl. And here's the other thing that people do. They don't store their stash of their oxycodone or supposed oxycodone tablets in an oxycodone bottle. They empty out the Tylenol bottle and they pour their pills in there. And then you go and say, hey, can I borrow Tylenol? And they forget what they have in that bottle, and you're about to have an overdose. Okay? So I control access to my medications. I would encourage you to do the same. Trace elements of carfentanil and butyrylfentanyl and phenylfentanyl are all in the community. You have that data. These are more potent than naloxone. Naloxone will reverse it at 0.4 nasal. I guarantee you won't wake up. Okay? Because we're going to have to use 2 milligrams. I'm glad to hear you're doing that, and even higher in the needle. So you may not get rescued. And you may not even know, so you may assume it's not an opioid overdose because they took a Xanax, what they thought was a Xanax, and it's actually an opioid overdose. So this is a problem. And we do need to educate people on this. Because really, like my kids, it's not my community. And they go to their friends and say, hey, I got a headache, can you give me something? It could be the last Tylenol they ever took. So be safe. It really is that dangerous out there. Agreed? Does anybody disagree with any of that statement? All right.
Agreed.
I'm serious. It's like playing Russian roulette. Just a few grains. A carfentanil overdose is a grain of sand. That's how small it is. So even if that powder is in the pill container and it gets on the pill that you get, it may be enough to get you because the people like my son or my daughter or me, I'm opioid naive. So it takes much less. Just a small dose of somebody else's bad decision making, and it's the end of my life. And so it sounds gloom and doom, because it's pretty gloom and doom. When we have the CDC saying a generation of Americans, that's the fundamental difference. And it's going to require partnerships of everybody that's up here and everybody that's in this room. And that's what can you do? Well, last year estimated $220 billion in lost revenues, estimated cost of loss of life, and all of the rescue law enforcement services, medical services that have to go to address the tertiary prevention of the person's overdosed in the ER. Not the overall cost. And so when our representatives in government say, hey, we're going to give $10 million to the state of Florida to solve this problem, the cost is billions. We're talking billions. And so if we really need to talk to people that control these purse strings as a community and say, yes, it's great that we all want to participate and we all give a lot of time, our own time to advocate, but we do need material money in order to attack the problem in a meaningful way. And how that's going to save lives is making sure that the evidence-based treatments are available. And that's Project Save Lives. Awesome project. I'm not affiliated. I hope to be affiliated in the second portion of this. But the key is getting them access to that evidence-based interventions, in particular MAT, so we can get those people on track, save the people that are already in trouble, and hopefully prevent the next cycle. That's my editorial.
Thank you.
Thank you. We appreciate you. To sort of springboard on what you said, Project Save Lives is going in the right direction.
Absolutely.
They are seeing a decrease in folks who are overdosing. There's a decrease in the recidivism that you talked about too, Richard. I mean, it's a wonderful project that's going in the right direction, and hopefully, as it continues, we'll see it replicated throughout the country.
Next week, City Council will vote on the extension of Project Save Lives with the same dollar amount. We're under budget, which is a good thing in government. Wow. And so we're looking at extending it, and for the 32210, we're reaching out to Park West, which is right there on 103rd, and going to try to bring the project there and to Memorial on the south side.
Make sure your representatives are aware that that project is important and that we, as taxpayers, are willing to fund these sorts of projects. We can't shoulder all of the burden, but if you're here, I suspect you might be interested in saying, hey, I'm willing to have some of my tax dollars go to do that. Oh, and one other thing about prescription medications. We know this from large-scale surveys of the United States. We have a very good idea of where people get their prescription tablets illicitly. Does anybody guess where they get it most often? Friends and family, 80% of the time. So this is what I mean, you can't tell. So, I borrowed some oxycodone from my dad, who couldn't get enough from his doctor and bought some from someone who got it from the drug dealer, and it's actually fentanyl, right? So that's how it gets out there. This is why you can't buffer yourself. Well, I'm not going out to Normandy Boulevard and going down to the guy that's sitting on the corner. I'm getting it from, a friend that I trust. Well, good luck with that, because what we know is 85%, that's how it's getting to folks, and it really is dangerous. And so, get your medications from your doctor. Okay, take them as prescribed. Don't get them from friends and family. And teach the people you love about this, about the risk of it.
So prior to tonight's program, did everyone in the audience know that you could be affected by the dust of this medication? Did not know until you shared that with us. So it is unlike anything we've seen. Do we have any questions from the audience for the panel? Yes, sir.
I've been in pharmacy for 23 years. My doctor for the last 10 years. Oxycodone, prescriptions down 400%. And went up 400%. So all we did was really shifted people out. I've also been clean and sober for 27 years. So very much through suicide, and thought I was acting too much cocaine at the age of 16. But what I'm currently doing right now is I'm opening a pharmacy. We work with North and naloxone with an 8765321. During 9 weeks, 12 months and 18 months, at 25% the cost of the retail level. A lot of things back to Suboxone, they say big pharma, they don't really want you. What happens, I find, is they just, you get on one and you just get off. And I cut my teeth on 12 steps, right? I still got to see on but this is a whole new creature of stuff that's out there. If we don't recognize it, we have to do some sort of thing.
And duration of treatment, the recommendation duration of treatment for substitution therapy is indefinite. Yes. So we don't say, we're going to try and get you off as soon as possible. Right? That's not the standard.
But what's happened, I think, is people are on it for 10 years, and they're looking at it, not get off. I mean, it's about something that is good to do. So, on that point, I really appreciate what you're doing. I hope you're waking up June 14th and start.
And it's very expensive.
It is.
And it's not readily available.
It's $20 a strip, $20 a day, $1,200 a month, $14,000 a year. Everybody else who's with their
That's branded. What's the generic cost?
There is no generic Suboxone.
That's not true. That's all I have.
On the strips.
No, on the strips, but there's generic sublingual tablets. That's all I have in the DA.
Who's doing those? But really, the strips is what a lot of the doctors are writing for. if you don't have that. And so a lot of people have been relatively uninsured. That's just really not so terrible. It's cheaper. And you get lead to Suboxone. So, you know, out of that, it's just, you know, it's.
I saw some other hands.
With Project Save Lives, knowing that they're going up for vote for the expansion, do they expect to go longer than another 6 months? Or, and the fact that you have 69 people enrolled is amazing and wonderful job. When do you expect, obviously, you know, success is a lifetime, you know, battle and, you know, commitment, but do you see a percentage of people that have been successful, or that, you know, do you think it'll take longer than another 6 months, and how long do you think we can keep this going? Because this is an amazing project.
So and there's going to be an extension of the program financially, or allowing that money it's going to sunset here on the next week. So starting on May 16th is to extend that $1.4 million, which we have a lot left, extend it to the end of the city's fiscal year through September 30th, 2018. That's the first extension voted on. Will be before City Council next week. There will then be a plan for another extension, because we should still have more money left, to run it through the city's next fiscal year, October 1st, 2018, and 2019, September 30th. As part of the extension, we look at expanding to 2 more EDs here in the next month or so, meeting with Memorial here in 3 weeks, and soon with Park West. The second phase of the extension hopes to bring on more EDs, more emergency departments, hospitals, as well as we just had a symposium and a lot of the treatment providers showed up at the symposium that UF Health hosted, and the goal is that we need beds. You know, the goal is from the ED, they're ready to go, and we need to be Johnny on the spot to get them to treatment, so that we can get these recovery treatment centers ready to accept these patients. And you know, and if we identify the VA, you know, we're with Dr. Cerner on that issue. So we are extending the money and we're expanding the services. And as far as recidivism, what Preston said, out of the 69 that I know they're involved, I only know of 2 that we have responded to for repeat overdose. Out of the 69, I know of 4 deaths, possibly 5 this past weekend, but at least 4 deaths that died in the ED or in the hospital. However, of the outside of that, the ones that have participated in the program in some sort of fashion, be it residential, outpatient, having a peer service, risk reduction, peer support, church, 12 steps, marijuana, as far as risk reduction, only 2 that we have gone to as a fire department for repeat overdose. That's good when our average overdose, 10% of our overdose patients are repeats or recidivism. So 2 out of 69 is not bad.
And if I could add to that, and I'm sorry, ma'am, the lack of beds, that's a big one too. I talk about it in our culture as the aha moment, because I had that, because it's a misnomer, folks, that people want to be addicted to drugs. I wanted to be off of crack more than my mom or that judge I was standing for, than anybody. But when you get that aha moment, that moment of clarity, and say, okay, I want to do it, and then you don't have a place to go, or you're calling around, or you're this and that, it is just devastating. It's more devastating than the drug. And then your thinking is already messed up. You say, well, nobody cares. I might as well just go keep doing what I'm doing. So the beds, I was talking yesterday, and I told them, I've taken people to detox down at Gateway, and you know, just in the time of filling out paperwork, they say, I'm going to go out and take a cigarette, and you never see them again. So the availability of those beds, and like Dr. Sona said, these are things we can talk to our representatives, the people we vote for, the people that run our city. We need money for that. I don't know how we get it. I'm not into politics, but it's definitely a need.
If anybody in here knows a veteran that is struggling with this illness, I can give my personal assurance that if they're eligible for care at the Department of Veterans Affairs, they will have access to all the standard of care treatments that I've discussed at low or no cost to the veteran. So I can't comment for the rest of the population, but that's our contribution to that population. This is a large veteran city, and so we are happy to treat those people. Just be aware that not all people who are veterans are eligible for care, but we will sort that out. And we're going to partner with Project Save Lives to figure out how do we, if we cannot provide ongoing care, can we get direct ongoing care in return. Every time they find a veteran that's eligible, we're going to take them on board and make sure they get the care that they need.
Well, first of all, care is not affordable for these loved ones. I have a loved one who's overdosed 3 times. This is my question. Are lawmakers looking at, you call 911, they give them Narcan, 2 doses of it, take them to the hospital. When they get better, they walk out. Nobody keeps them there. They don't get treatment. Or you send them to rehab, they get clean, they come out, they overdose because they're not used to it anymore. What can you do to, I'm going through the Marchman Act right now. It is not working. It is not working because you have the burden to prove that they are addicted. And you can't bring medical records in there. I just had a hearing last week. Don't know if my son showed up. It's my son, and I wish he would be taking this leave. I really don't want him to take it. It is my son, my 29-year-old son.
Thank you for being here.
That's right.
But what you're asking for is exactly what the pilot is trying to establish, and then try to take it out further. But
and I'm going to address the Marchman Act. So within the Marchman Act, I believe it's Florida Statute 394. So 2 things that are important on there. Within the Marchman Act, most people think of the Marchman Act similar to a Baker Act, which is more for mental health, where they're a risk to themselves or others. The Marchman Act is for substance misuse. And most people think of the Marchman Act as the family's got to get involved and petition to the court. You know, usually 2 or 3 of the families got to petition to a judge. It's a several-day process, and that's not the quickest. And the whole time, your son or loved one is out there using. So within the Marchman Act, there's a physician certification, and that is where Project Save Lives is working with the ED doctor, primarily Dr. Gilberstein at St. Vincent's, and to educate ED physicians who teach themselves. They're having to learn this right now. What authority do physicians have? And there is the ability for an ED physician period, not just the ER physician, and Dr. Schoner can do it, to basically certify an individual and put them into involuntary emergency treatment and detox. It's called a physician certification. It is not used often. Physicians simply don't know. So we are working with Project Save Lives to get a subject matter expert, attorney, to let these physicians know what can they do, and that would eliminate the need for the family to get immediately involved. So now it still has to be followed up by court. Several days later, there's a time frame. I think it's 48 hours. So you got to get something to the court to keep them. But basically, it buys time. I'm not an addict. In knowing people who suffer from opioid substance use disorder, what I hear is those withdrawal symptoms. They don't want to go through that pain, particularly like those like getting on Vivitrol. You got to be clean for 7 or 10 days. So they don't want to go through that. And what we're trying to do is bring compassionate care to the ED. Wherever your son is picked up, wherever he's transported to, is to educate that ED about compassionate care to get those muscle relaxers, those alpha blockers on board to decrease those withdrawal symptoms, to satiate his brain so that he can sit there.
You have to have him back to this house. Yeah. He gave him medication which helped that, but then he went right back to it.
Yes, ma'am.
And ma'am, speaking as an addict, a substance use disorder guy, I was Marchman Act by my family. And I'm not trying to be a Debbie Downer on this one, but we all have to remember we're not thinking rationally. One of the things that keeps us in our addictions are resentments. And I hated my family for what they did to me. And it became a big, why are you doing this to me? You know, and I'm not saying it doesn't work for everyone, because everyone can tell you, Dr. Sorner, everybody up here, there's all different aspects of keeping people in addiction, with enabling being way up there at the top. So we have enabling, we have resentments, we have you just don't know, You mix all that up and you've got a formula that is just out of control and crazy. I've gone to the Marksman Act with a couple of people, and then I'm going to end with this. Self-responsibility is very high when it comes to breaking this cycle. I don't know too much about the physical addiction part and all that. I never went through that. But the one thing I do know is you've got to surrender, that's old school, and say, I'm done, I won't help. Whatever you guys tell me, I'm going to do. And I just want to say, and God bless you. And like you said, thank you for being here. You're the most important person in the room.
My experience taking home to you would be, I work in the field, we talk a lot about compassion fatigue. It's fatiguing. You know, we have many patients that do very well. We have patients that have bad outcomes, including death. And, unfortunately, it does take a buy-in by the individual ultimately, even to engage in these medical treatments. But what I can say to you as a person that works with patients who struggle with this illness all day, every day, is that I have had patients that I thought weren't going to make it, and multiple relapses, multiple times, but we just keep trying, and then one day it works, and you hope you beat them, you know, in regards to, getting before the bad outcome happens. So I do see that, you know, despite how many failures you may face, there is hope, and I see people every day stay in that mode. I pray for you and your family. Keep trying. You might consider to help you and other people who aren't struggling with the active illness. Al-Anon can be a great support. And so to help, I know I have to do it. My mother's still an active addict, and so I find Al-Anon to be a great relief for me because I try to practice addiction medicine and it doesn't work well. So, you know, I have to take care of myself and how my relationship to her illness works inside of me and how that jeopardizes me. Because you can't be there if you have compassion fatigue and you're not taking care of yourself. So my prayers with you, and there is always hope.
Yeah. And I'd like to connect with you if you're up to possibly having a recovery peer specialist, somebody who, if you would be open to possibly allow me to connect your son with a recovery peer specialist, somebody who is.
I don't even know where my son is right now, but yeah, I would be open to that.
I'll give you a phone number and the cell phone number of somebody at Gateway to help him.
Any other questions? I was curious about that Narcan, is it a limited how many times it can be used on a person? And then how many people are you encountering that you hear about these people? They call, get an overdose, go out there, give it to them, back, give it to them again and again. So is there a high percentage of that? And then you mentioned this at Walgreens, which I didn't know that. Is that something you just go in there, sign on the aisle, buy it, and you go on, and you have to ask for it, or can anyone buy it, and like a 13-year-old go buy it, or how does that work?
It's a great question, thank you. So it is not over the counter. It is, the law's changed to allow pharmacists to prescribe it without you walking in with your own prescription. So it is still recorded, your name, turning your driver's license, just similar to picking up, really, say even Sudafed. Right. It's kept behind there, and so yes, literally you can walk into Walgreens as an adult and simply say, I want some nasal Narcan. And they're going to give you a form to fill out, and probably within 5 minutes it's going to show up at about $36 or $40, and then they zero out. This is Walgreens. And I'm not plugging Walgreens, but I'm quite impressed.
Who's funding that? Do you know, is it the state?
So I do not know. I don't know if it's a product with Adapt Pharma, and I say that because Adapt Pharma is a producer of nasal Narcan, and I know they work with Dr. Duvall and also with Project Save Lives. As far as, and I know we also have monies from the state, Lutheran Services funding that. But so, how many times you can give it? As many times as the symptoms are there, or somebody's unresponsive and or shallow or not breathing. So there's no endpoint, and it is safe. There are side effects if somebody is on an opioid and it reverses. Oftentimes the person may experience a sudden abrupt awakening. They may vomit. They may have shakes or seizure-like activity similar to withdrawal symptoms. And it may take them several minutes, similar to coming out of a seizure, to be acclimated and understand what's going on. But as long as the victim is unresponsive or not breathing, naloxone is indicated. And the pack that you can get at Walgreens tonight, it's 8 milligrams. It's a 4 milligram nasal spray and 2-pack. So similar to an EpiPen, you always have to carry 2. So. Just recently, several months ago, I added nasal Narcan to our paramedics reporting software so that we can track it. And to date, we have 3 times where the paramedics have documented that nasal Narcan was given prior to our arrival. So that lets me know it is out there in the community. On average, we're giving about 250 doses of Narcan a month. Our paramedics are. We've seen a sharp decrease actually over the past, since November, a very sharp decrease. So last month we gave 182 doses of Narcan.
In our community, we have a national effort to maximize naloxone prescribing to veterans that are at risk for overdose. That doesn't necessarily mean they have an opioid use disorder, but people on high doses of opioids may have other conditions that increase their risk of overdose death, inadvertent overdose death. And we've thought about the concerns about some of these untoward or unintended consequences of use in regard to enabling continued behavior. But our data from us is pretty clear that it definitely saves lives. It definitely extends the moment of the opportunity to potentially intervene. This is policy of one addiction psychiatrist that I prescribe a lot of this medication. And if they lose it or ask for another one, I'm happy to give them another gift. I don't ask a lot of questions because I think it's have another gift.
This gentleman here.
You guys do these types of forums in like the high schools and middle schools as far as prevention and, you know, targeting and educating youth? I mean, how early?
So there's a drug-free Duval. I'm aware of Melanie that works with the school. She's basically the youth coordinator. And I personally met a JSO officer that was also part of the program to help educate the schools. We, JFRD, have not gone into the schools. We do more fire safety within the schools at this point.
Yeah, I have not participated in the forum in the schools themselves. But the school board has a police department too, so I can't speak exactly what they're doing. But I know, like Mark was saying, we do participate in drug-free Duval and their programs that are aimed at teens. I just don't know how many of those are actually in schools.
I know I got a 16-year-old daughter. She's an addict, and she's at Webster High School, and, you know, I'm an addict, and I know she inherited it from me. So, and I've seen firsthand her go through a few things, and I've already gotten a phone call from Jacksonville Beach Police to go pick her up because she was skipping school, smoking weed. And I was just wondering, you know, you were talking about prevention and information, you know, being an ounce of knowledge is worth a ton of cure and whatnot. I mean, the numbers you guys are spitting out today is informative. It's enlightening. It's something that's grabbed my attention where before I was uneducated in a few areas. Now I am educated. A lot of high schoolers may or may not listen, but for those that do listen, you know, word spreads by word of mouth, and it could possibly work or help.
Great point. There's another organization out there, everybody heard of the Derek Hatcher Foundation.
Yes.
Good group. Derek's mom was the one who was in the community, going to schools, talking about the dangers of opioid abuse. Derek Hatcher, unfortunately, died of an overdose a few years ago. He was a football star locally. Heart still aches thinking about her, but she's turned a bad situation, trying to make a good out of that. She's trying to educate the community. There's a website, go to that, learn from that, there's a schedule from the school.
And if I could add something else to that, there is a program through Drug-Free Duval, and it's called Export. I'm not good with the acronym, sir. I'll give you my phone number before you leave, and I'll get you in touch. I'll get more information about it. And it is awareness for middle school. I think it starts in middle school, 6 through 9. We were just up in Tallahassee a couple of months ago, and we talked to a lot of the representatives and the senators about that. And that bill did pass. So there's something going on with that. I don't want to give you any wrong information, but I guarantee you I will get you the information. And if I can, this young lady right here, Cheryl, I don't want to butcher her last name, but she's on the front line too. When he brings up Debbie Hatcher, she has a story. I won't, if she wants to share it, that will be her. But she's on the cutting edge of this too because of something that didn't have a great outcome.
Yeah, I lost my husband it'll be almost 9 months, a couple of weeks now. And we were voiceless for so long. So I feel like I need to be a voice for those that do not have one right now. And as you said, education is key, and that's what I can do is help raise awareness as to what, the family and the picture of an addict actually looks like. And it's not typically what you think it might look like. And I wanted to make a comment because I think this report is phenomenal, because I've been doing a lot of research. It's alarming, especially knowing my husband is one of the numbers on here. But is there any thoughts about putting something like this together for like the hospital? The state of Florida has, you mentioned that we were number 2 for deaths with fentanyl next to West Palm Beach. And the medical examiner has a great report too, broken down. Is there any thoughts on doing something like this for the hospitals that are actually, obviously you're transporting them to the hospital, but there's
difficulty with the hospitals. The hospitals do report through ACA, and also there is a repository. I was trying to think of the name of the software, the program. And UF Health is part of Project Save Lives. They're tapping into that resource, and we have a term called healthcare economists, basically that look at the impact of different ailments financially, and of course that garners the hospital's attention when you talk about economics. The problem that we're seeing right now in coalescing and pulling the data from the hospitals are billing codes, or ICD-10 codes. They're basically classification codes that the physician has to select based on the diagnosis. And oftentimes there are, I think it's 30,000 or something ICD-10 codes. It recently upgraded about 2 years ago from ICD-9 to ICD-10. Anybody in healthcare understands the nightmare of picking an ICD-10 code. For substance use, there may be several hundred. You got to keep drilling down to whatever the substance is. And oftentimes when the patient presents to the ED, they may be there for other ailments. They got in a car accident because they were using drugs. So they have a traumatic injury, which is the ICD-10 code, to their ankle, their left ankle. They also have substance misuse. My point in that is the data is very different. And there is no one standard, no one set of who's coding this, what this physician decides to code. This physician just decides, you know what, I got to get out of here. I'm clicking the first thing I see. The other physician may take their time and drill down. We are addressing it. Dr. Gilbert is trying to work with providers. Our data from the hospitals is so skewed because of that.
Yeah, I couldn't find really a lot of information online that was pretty particular, because my research, when I'm going to be speaking about this, I need to make sure that I've got the correct data. So I'm not speaking on that, but from the medical examiner's office and the CDC, there's a lot of information, just not a lot in the hospitals.
CDC's had points on this. This data that we know of is alarming. This is not the whole amount. You ask anybody who spends a lot of time, they have no idea how actually big the problem is. But it's much bigger than this very scary data would indicate. Because if you end up being coded for death as respiratory failure, and with the medical examiner officers throughout the nation being overwhelmed and having their own cost constraints, we lose capture on a lot of things that were actually overdose deaths that we may not know. And so it's a bigger problem than even the data would exhibit, but the data is enough for us to act, is kind of how I think about it. Would you agree with that statement, Doctor?
Yeah, I would.
Is there anything that we left out of the conversation tonight that you would like to make sure that we all leave with? When we're getting out of here tonight, what do you want to resonate with us? And Tim, we'll start with you.
The biggest piece is education, awareness in the community. We kind of all addressed it locally here tonight. Overcoming the stigma of the addiction, because it affects everybody. We've all seen it. Overcoming the stigma, educating the community. The state attorney's office, we know we can't prosecute our way out of this problem. We play a small part in that, like a 3-legged stool, prevention, treatment, enforcement. So us at JSO, we have the enforcement people. We also play an active role with the prevention and treatment, work with Coach Ball, Gateway. So it's a team effort that's got to come together as a team to solve this problem.
I would say don't be afraid to talk to those that represent you at the state, and federal level about the need to increase access to meaningful treatment for folks. As I travel and go to these forums, that's typically the number one topic that comes up. Folks that are willing to share is they have a loved one that they're having, even when they have that moment when they're ready for treatment, they don't have anywhere to get them. And it's heartbreaking to hear that.
I would say get involved. There's nothing too little that you can do. Passing out pamphlets, helping the ladies at Drug Free Duval. Everybody helps, from the top doctor, Dr. Gilbreth, Dr. Palm, medical examiner's office. Everybody is a vital cog in helping this epidemic. I ran into people yesterday, and the name was James and Amy Gandy, and they're out in the 103rd Street area, and their ministry is called Hands and Feet, because that's what they do. They're on their hands and feet, and they're in the trenches with the people where they are, trying to help them. So, as somebody said, it takes a village, and we need it.
As I think Richard alluded to, simply telling somebody who's suffering deep in addiction or opioid use, substance use disorder, saying no, saying stop it, doesn't work. In that vein, what I would encourage and ask is for anybody who is using drugs, don't do it alone. Not to encourage drug use, but don't do drugs alone. Give yourself an opportunity to live. And consider getting Narcan, letting where the Narcan is in the house and wherever it is, but simply don't do drugs alone.
Dr. Gillespie.
Well, unfortunately, I see the end result of all this, but I think that what I've learned about it is that, first of all, it's a very dangerous time to be a drug addict or a recreational drug user, and that margin of safety is so small with these substances. It's much more dangerous than using cocaine or using alcohol or anything like that, because it's so unpredictable. You don't know what you're buying, you don't know what you're getting, and we see a tremendous increase throughout the whole state of Florida, actually. It's just too dangerous.
Dr. Soren, our sort of honorary panelist.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I'm excited that you guys are doing this, and that's why I heard on the radio and diverted to over here. So I appreciate this meeting. I would piggyback. I really think that this is a community-based problem, so it's going to require community-based solutions. The addiction psychiatrist, there's two of us in the Jacksonville area, me and Ray Palm, so we're not going to be able to address directly all of the needs, and so we need partners in the community that are willing to give resources. We need the community to advocate for our community to our legislators to prioritize this as an emergency, as a public health emergency, as the president said, and do what you can. Think globally, act locally. And so, I'll do my little piece of the pie where I can and show up to meetings where I can and spread the word. And when we prioritize it together, I'm confident we can find solutions. It's just going to require everyone's perspective and everyone's support, because it's that big of a problem.
And sir.
I was just going to say, my name is Dave Kirby. I work for the court system. I'm the Veterans Treatment Court case manager. And if anybody knows of anyone that needs assistance in the justice system, come down to 2321 and check out their case and try to see what we can do for them.
Diversion court's highly effective. So those are awesome resources.
But Jacksonville Public Library wants to thank our panelists, our subject matter experts for being here tonight. We want to thank all of you who came, those of you who shared your stories. I think that made it much more impactful for us. If you would, before you leave, please fill out a program evaluation so that we know what types of programs you would like to see in the future. Again, thank you to our panelists. Thank you so much. And thank you to all of you, and have a good night.
Thank you.
Always
Thank you so much.